Hey there, Mr. Terry, high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher X video. All right, we're back with friend of the channel, the Fat Electrician, and his latest video is called American Samurai. America's Samurai, the 442nd Infantry, the most decorated unit of World War II. Now that is saying a lot in the history of the United States military. So I know this story is going to be awesome. All right, the original video is down below. Make sure you're supporting him. Give the video a view, of course, sub, and buy his cool merch. By the way, right now, it is the 85th anniversary of the incredible Dunkirk evacuation of World War II. In this operation, also known as Operation Dynamo, 330,000 British soldiers on the brink of death on the shores of northern France were brought back safely to Britain. And right now, in World of Warships, they are commemorating this heroic endeavor with the Dunkirk 1940 event, which challenges players to strategically command ships and civilian vessels to rescue those Allied troops and bring them safely home. Earn rewards by completing missions, culminating in winning the Tier 6 premium British destroyer Gallant, get 3 times the Operation Dynamo containers, and get the Braving Fire flag. Honor history and prove your tactical prowess in this unique World of Warships event. And right now is the perfect time to start playing. Use the code DYNAMO1940 at the link in the description, and you're also going to get 7 days premium account time, 1 million credits, 500 doubloons, a Tier 7 ship, and an Operation Dynamo container. And best of all, World of Warships is free to play on PC. So join me in World of Warships, and let's get these men back home. All right, let's get back to the video. All right, I'm excited to interject anything I can, but I know with these stories, I learn so much.
This is my third attempt in the last year at making this video, but it's one of those ones that you have to get right.
Oh,
today we're
okay,
talking
so he's
about
taking
America's
it serious,
Samurai,
huh?
the Nisei, the second generation Japanese Americans that comprise the 442nd Infantry Regiment and the 100th Infantry Battalion, aka the Purple Heart Battalion.
Oh, let's go. Okay, I have never heard of this group before. So these guys are Japanese, okay, World War II, fighting, I guess, against the Japanese. Is that what's going to be happening here? I mean, we had the internment of Japanese American citizens in World War II, so this is kind of interesting if they were like, you know, didn't feel that they were going to be a threat at all, because that was, you know, kind of the worry, I guess, the FDR, the government had. There could be spies, you know, in the U.S. with these Japanese citizens, and we'll see.
In World War II, America did what is, in my opinion, one of the most disgusting things that the American government has ever done. Yeah. They signed an executive order suspending all of the constitutional rights of Japanese Americans and then forced over 120,000 American citizens into an internment camp for the duration of World War II for no other reason than they had Japanese ancestry.
Right. When Nick was on my episode of History Showdown, he was with Ethan, habitual line crosser, and then Chris Cappy. One of the questions we got asked by the chat was most overrated president. And Nick is not an FDR fan. And that's one of the biggest things he talks about is that internment. By the way, who do you think is the most overrated president in U.S. history? Let me know down below.
Despite that, the sons of these Japanese Americans not only volunteered to fight for America in World War II, they demanded and petitioned for the opportunity to do so. And not only did they fight, they became one of the most effective and decorated combat units in American history.
Set the tone. Okay.
All right, our story begins on December 7th, 1941, when the Imperial Japanese attack America at Pearl Harbor. Okay, everybody knows what the attack on Pearl Harbor is, but what almost nobody knows about is the Niihau incident that happened directly after the attack on Pearl Harbor that would change the course of American history. During the second wave of the attack at Pearl Harbor, America was able to get some of their fighter planes up in the air and begin fighting back. Some of these American fighter planes were obviously shooting at the Japanese fighter planes, and one of these Japanese Zeros ends up getting shot in its fuel tank and leaks out a bunch of its fuel. The Imperial...
Okay. Yeah, but there were 2 attacks. So they were about an hour apart from each other. And one of the targets was indeed the airfields, because there were hundreds of planes that were not in the port necessarily at Pearl Harbor, but up kind of in the hills, there was some airfields. So we were able to get some of them off, but there were still, was it a couple hundred planes destroyed? I mean, if you guys know about the Pearl Harbor attack from Japan, it was very successful from that immediate standpoint.
these Japanese Zeros ends up getting shot in its fuel tank and leaks out a bunch of its fuel. The Imperial Japanese pilot Shigenori Nishikaichi does the only thing he can do in that situation. He makes an emergency landing on what he believes to be a small uninhabited Hawaiian island known as Niihau. However, he was incorrect. The island actually had 135 inhabitants, 133 of which were native Hawaiians, and then there was one Japanese couple, Yoshi and Irene Horata. Now, Niihau is like 140 miles away from Pearl Harbor, so the residents of the island had no idea that Japan was actually attacking America. So when he first made this emergency landing, everybody was happy to help this guy. They thought he was just, you know, a pilot from a friendly country that needed their help. Then within a couple of hours, word had reached Niihau that America was under attack by the Japanese, at which point the Hawaiians did the appropriate thing. They took him as their prisoner, took away his guns, locked him up, and they were going to hold him for the American government to come and get him.
All right, let me ask you this one time. What master do you serve?
What master do I serve? What am I supposed to say, Jesus?
But for whatever reason, Yoshi and Irene decided that they were sympathetic towards this Japanese pilot, so much so that they were actually going to help him break out of jail, arm him, and try to help him escape.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
This plan would ultimately be thwarted by the Hawaiians, primarily a man by the name of Ben Kanahle, who was a World War I veteran and rancher. When Ben Kanahle went to stop Shigenori from escaping, Shigenori shot him 3 times, at which point Ben Kanahle proceeds to pick Shigenori up and throw him at a stone wall. His wife then bashes him in the head with a rock while Ben pulls out his hunting knife and slits his throat.
Oh my gosh. Okay. First off, the guy's on an island. How can you truly escape? I mean, was he trying to get back with his plane again? Was the plane obviously he landed safely, but enough to get off again. But yeah, if there's going to be a war vet there, you know, he's not going to be okay with this. And kind of amazing that, okay, so you have this Japanese pilot, right? And you could tell, I guess they're not to that point where immediate capture would mean basically sacrificing yourself, you know, harikari style, as so many of them did, because as you went on the war, what the Japanese soldiers are basically taught is you do not want to be a prisoner of war. You're better off killing yourself. And one of the ways that they were able to convince, of course, a lot of people with that, not just because of Bushido code and all that, was how poorly, of course, the Japanese treated POWs. And so what Japanese soldiers then thought is like, well, we see how we treat POWs. Therefore, we would never want to be a POW of another enemy because they're going to treat us just as bad. So you'd want to just not even put yourself in that situation of being captured.
Which I cannot stress to you enough is the most Polynesian American shit I have ever heard in my entire life. Homie gets shot 3 times, then proceeds to pick up the armed gunman and throw him at a wall like he's the Incredible Hulk.
Heck yeah. We Polynesians are crazy strong to me.
After that, Yoshi, the Japanese man that was trying to help him escape, would also wind up dead, and his wife Irene would end up being incarcerated for the rest of World War II. So Ben Kanahle saves the day. Hooray, that's good. Bad news, this is a really, really bad look for pretty much all Japanese Americans, right? There was 2 Japanese Americans present, and they elected to side with the Imperial Japanese that were attacking America. And this winds up being one of the main catalysts and excuses for the American government discriminating against American citizens that had Japanese ancestry.
So was this actually cited in some way? Do we know the connection of that story to the order that went out for that? Like FDR was made aware of that. Okay. I mean, that sucks. That sucks because of all the Japanese people that are going to get interned there in concentration camps. But I mean, this is going to be an outlier for sure.
In 1942, the Hawaiian National Guard released all of its soldiers that had Japanese ancestry and basically just kicked them out of the army, which is kind of a big deal because at this point in time, like 40% of the Hawaiian population actually had Japanese ancestry. Yeah.
By the way, if you're wondering why is that the case, there was a big movement in the 1800s of people leaving Asia, East Asia, it was China, Japan as well, for basically greener pastures. Those were economically very difficult times. Japan story is going to be a little different with the opening of Japan and that kind of thing, but in East Asia also in general. And Hawaii was a large destination for migrants, especially because of the agricultural opportunities that were there to basically be farmers. If you know about how Hawaii gets colonized by the U.S., it was literally about like farming pineapples essentially. But there were a lot. There was a lot of people had migrated for economic opportunities out of East Asia.
Then by February 19th, 1942, FDR would sign Executive Order 9066,
I always forget
which
that number,
effectively
9066.
suspended all of the constitutional rights of any Japanese American, ordered them to sell their homes, sell their businesses for a much lower value than they were actually worth, and then they were supposed to report to an internment camp for the duration of World War II.
Yeah. And the problem is, if he doesn't get to it, is that so many of these interned Japanese Americans, when they went home, were not able to go back to their homes or their businesses. They basically had to restart their lives. There was a lot of vandalism, as anti-Japanese, racism was a huge thing in the U.S. So they didn't come back to a very good life, unfortunately for them.
A single pen stroke, 120,000 American citizens lost all of their constitutional rights and went from being a full-fledged American to a prisoner like that. Now, like I already said, I think that is one of the most disgusting things the American government has ever done. However, I do have to get kind of sidetracked because I have a crazy conspiracy theory about this, and it's going to get weird, so bear with me.
I'm going to get real weird with it. Meanwhile, block the wind. I'm going to roast this bone.
Jesus Christ.
I think that this inspired Star Wars, and just hear me out.
Okay.
The Jedi and the Sith, the guys with the lightsabers are clearly inspired by samurai. They have the robes, they have the same garb, they have swords, that's their primary weapon. They're just space samurai.
And they live by that code. I think George Lucas, hasn't he actually said that before? He was really influenced by like Westerns and the Japanese.
They have the robes, they have the same garb, they have swords, that's their primary weapon. They're just space samurai, that's all it is. You've got the Jedi, which are the good ones, and then you've got the Sith, which are the bad ones, similar to Japanese people. You've got the Imperial Japanese, which are the bad ones, and then you have the American Japanese, which are the good ones. But then Chancellor Palpatine comes along. He is the leader of the Republic, the president, so to speak. Also worth noting, he's an elderly guy that nobody ever sees standing up. He's always sitting down.
I'm too weak. Oh, don't kill me.
And he issues him.
So he had polio as well, huh? Is this one of the effects of polio, with his face?
Always sitting down.
I'm too weak. Oh, don't kill me.
That's what FDR had.
And he issues an order to get rid of all the Jedi. He gets rid of all the good guys, just like that. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Chubby Electron guy's reaching too far. He's lost his mind. Potentially, okay? But here's the linchpin in the entire argument, right? When Emperor Palpatine got rid of the Jedi, he got rid of the good guys, he executed Order 66. When FDR got rid of all the Japanese Americans, he signed Executive Order 9066. I mean, what the fuck are the odds, right?
They're on to me, dude. Those guys are sharp as nails up there. You can't put anything past them.
Sorry, I'm getting...
We need to get Lucas on the record. George Lucas, if somehow, if you can hear this, if somebody can get to him, he can come onto my channel, my stream, and we'll ask him.
Sidetracked. Anyways, 120,000 Japanese American citizens end up getting thrown in concentration camps inside of America. Shitty, awful, horrible, but it's what happened. In Hawaii, however, things went a little bit different because a significant portion of the Hawaiian population was Japanese, and they couldn't throw all of them in a concentration camp. Otherwise, it would crash the entire Hawaiian economy. So a lot of them got to kind of live borderline normal lives. So a lot of the Japanese Americans that were previously serving in the National Guard that got released from duty end up forming what they called the Varsity Victory Volunteers, and they petitioned the Hawaiian governor, and they were like, hey, look, I understand I have a Japanese ancestry, but I'm not Japanese. I'm an American. I understand you're not going to let me fight and have a gun, but I still want to help with this war effort any way I can because this is my home and I want to fight for it. And the Hawaiian governor ends up letting them form this volunteer group. And essentially, they just start doing any manual labor jobs that they can do that's going to help with the war effort. They're stringing out concertina wire. They're digging ditches. They're pouring roads. They're pouring airstrips. They're doing anything and everything that gets asked of them. And
this is where I was wondering about that, because if they're just going to intern Japanese citizens, then why on earth would you put them in your military where they could be the most threatening, I guess, if they are going to, betray the United States? But it also looks like, at least from the start, they're giving them the crap work that nobody wants to do. Not putting them out on the lines or like giving intelligence or something like that. But I'm assuming that's going to change here pretty soon.
And this goes on for months. And then by June of 1942, the government's like, okay, I get it. You guys are loyal to America. We're going to go ahead. We're going to bring you back into the army, but you're going to be in a segregated all Japanese unit being led by white officers. You're going to be known as the 100th Infantry Battalion.
By the way, this is, we still have desegregation in the military. Still a thing.
So they take 1,500 of these young Japanese American men that are second generation Americans, also known as Nisei, and they ship them off to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, which is completely redundant because all of them had already been in the Hawaiian National Guard and they'd already gone through Army basic training, but that's where they send them to go through it again, and they do it.
Done, drill sergeant?
I love Forrest Gump.
Together so quickly, Gump.
You told me to, drill sergeant.
And while they're there, the
Forrest
Nisei
Gump's so
continue to
good.
prove that they are 1,000% committed to America, despite the fact that America has given them every reason to not be. And they prove it not with just their general dedication to the task, but while they're actually there, the Army secretly sends in psychologists inside of their command structure to evaluate them, to see if they're lying, to see if they're actually dedicated to America.
Yeah,
And
not
all of the
surprised to see
psychologists
this.
are like, yeah, these guys are 100% legit. They mean it when they say they're here to fight for America.
A question I have about these guys is, are they first generation? Were they born in Japan? Were their parents? How many lines, generational lines, are they from Japan?
On top of that, they go above and beyond when 5 Nisei end up getting awarded the Soldier's Medal because there was some civilians that went out on a frozen lake and the ice shattered and they were going to drown, and these young Nisei went out and saved these civilians. In addition to that, 26 of them volunteered to go be bait for attack dogs when America was trying to train dogs to be able
That's
to
not a
sniff
lot of
out Japanese people for the
protection.
Pacific Theater. They were literally doing anything and everything that was asked of them, regardless of how shitty of a job it was. And somewhere along the way, it becomes clear to the chain of command, like, okay, these guys are legit. We're going to give them guns and we're going to send them off into combat, but we're going to make sure that we send them off into the European theater. We're not going to send them into the Japanese theater for a multitude of reasons. One, if they get caught as Japanese Americans fighting against Japan, the Japanese are going to absolutely torture them to death, and it's going to be horrible. So
You're right. I mean, that was already so much of the case for when they captured Chinese or, again, American soldiers. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine what they would do to Japanese Americans. Wouldn't it be like worse than the stuff we saw in Nanking? Like, probably, right? The ultimate traitors in theirs, and loyalty being such a huge part of that Japanese culture that was being resurrected in this era. Oh my God. Okay. So it's like, I'm sure, well, I mean, did those guys, were they like extra mad at Japan, or were they kind of indifferent, I wonder, between who they were actually going to fight? Was it like extra motivation? Yeah, we want to fight the Japanese, or they just, whatever.
A, we're going to protect them in that fashion, but B, we also don't want Japanese Americans really participating in the Pacific Theater in a combat role, because if the American soldiers that aren't Japanese get accustomed to seeing Japanese guys in an American uniform, eventually the Japanese could figure out, like, hey, we're going to start taking uniforms off of dead GIs, we're going to dress up as Americans, infiltrate their ranks, and then wreak havoc behind friendly lines.
To be honest right now,
Yeah.
how confident are we
Schultz.
that we're going to be able to know who's who, right? Like, it's going to be the Spider-Man meme, like...
So at this point,
I mean, as crazy as that sounds, that's honestly not like a bad strategy to use if they are going to, have this multiracial army.
they send him off to Camp Shelby, Mississippi for advanced infantry training, and then FDR announces that he's going to form an even larger all-Japanese Nisei regiment, the 442nd. Now, the American government is hoping to get 4,500 volunteers to be in the 442nd Infantry Regiment, which is kind of a big ask from a community of people that you've just taken all of their civil rights away and then thrown them in a prison.
Yeah.
And not only do they end up getting...
Yeah, I don't know how many, like, if they're going to go up into those camps, do you think that they were, the people, the Japanese Americans that are in those camps, like, would be willing to fight after what had happened there? Maybe before that.
just taken all of their civil rights away and then thrown them in a prison. And not only do they end up getting 4,500 volunteers, they get over 10,000, which is absolutely insane, because I'm gonna tell you right now, if you incarcerated my entire family for no other reason than the color of their skin and then asked me to go fight in a world war for you, I would probably tell you to go fuck yourself. So all 10,000 of these dudes are far bigger men than me. Speaking of bigger men than me, one of the volunteers is a young man by the name of Daniel Inouye, who is currently in med school trying to be a doctor. When Pearl Harbor happened, he ran to the nearest Blue Cross aid station and started working around the clock treating the wounded. And he's been volunteering at aid stations and hospitals for months while also going to med school ever since Pearl Harbor happened. So when he goes to the draft board, the draft board tells him, like, no, you're too valuable where you're at. You're going to go off and become a doctor. On top of that, you're already doing a bunch of work for us stateside. We don't want to send you off to combat. So he's like, okay, I'll be right back. He leaves, drops out of med school, tells the hospital he's not coming back to help anymore, and and then goes back to the draft board and is like, I just quit my job and I dropped out of med school. Fucking send me. So they end up sending him, and he ships off with the rest of the 442nd Infantry Regiment for basic training 2 days later. While the 442nd ship off to get their training started, the 100th Infantry Battalion is finishing up their advanced training at Camp Shelby, Mississippi. They are then sent off to North Africa, and they get there in September of 1943. So they land in Oran, which is a major port city in Algeria, and from there they get attached to the 34th Infantry Division, aka the Red Bulls, in particular the 133rd Infantry Regiment, aka the Iron Men, which, cool part, that's my old unit. Not so cool part, the commander is kind of a dickhead because when he has his greeting speech to the 100th Infantry Battalion, he openly refers to them as the guinea pigs from Pearl Harbor. And not that I'm trying to defend Commander Mark Clark for calling them guinea pigs, I'm absolutely not. But to put it into a little bit of context, a lot of people have a lot of doubts that the Nisei soldiers are going to be effective on the battlefield, okay? The average Nisei soldier at this point in time was between 5'4" and 5'6" and weighed somewhere between 120 and 140 pounds. And they just got attached to the 34th Infantry Division, which is based out of the Midwest, okay? The 34th Infantry Division, by and large today, but especially back then, was almost nothing but 185-pound corn-fed white boys with machine guns that grew up on a farm. So they're looking at these dudes with a smaller stature like, what do you guys really think you're going to do on this battlefield? Why are you even here?
I would think that there would be racial issues, just specifically with them being Japanese. Right, you're already going to have, we know, against maybe the black and white troops, if that was, the case. And they did they still segregated. It wasn't until after World War II that our military was desegregated. But you wonder if some of them farm boys might not look too kindly, to those Japanese soldiers. You'd hope not, though.
Look at that. He's making me cry.
If the Nisei want respect, they're going to have to prove themselves. And from the second they step foot in combat, that's exactly what they did, because they started kicking ass right outside of Salerno, Italy, when they first saw combat. For their first week of combat, they drove the Germans back from North 15 Africa. Miles per day, every single day. These guys were fearless on the battlefield. In a matter of a couple of months, they had completely changed the opinions of absolutely everybody that encountered them. Mark Clark, the same commander that referred to them as guinea pigs, sent a note up the chain of command saying, hey, when that 442nd Infantry Regiment's done training, I want them too. These Nisei fighters are fucking awesome. When the Des Moines Register, the biggest newspaper back home in Iowa, wrote an article being critical of the Nisei being attached to the 34th Infantry Division, the members of the 34th Infantry Division wrote a letter to their editor.
By the way, we'll see if he gets a letter. I want to let you guys know, just as a teacher, I one of the things I started doing this channel for was to learn more things, and especially the stories. Like, of course, with my studies, I have a college education and in history and all this experience with curriculum and all, but it's the individual stories, right? The individual stories are great things that I like to add, and I get so much from watching guys like Nick, like the Fat Electrician. And this could definitely be one of those when you talk about the internment of the Japanese Americans, and this kind of makes it look a lot worse, because it's like you have these very, very devoted Japanese Americans there that, again, were being deported to these camps. But then you had these guys that were demanding to fight. Incredible.
And I quote,
this is going to be one of those stories, I can tell. All right. Anyway.
34th Infantry Division wrote a letter to their editor.
Okay.
And I quote, we're Iowa boys of the 34th Division. We have fought side by side with the boys of Japanese descent. We know plenty of folks that call themselves Americans that have done much less to prove they give a hang about their country.
Let's go.
There have been times when these Japanese, as you call them, have saved many lives only because they have proven themselves better Americans than some that were not of Japanese descent.
Let's go. Hell yeah.
So not only are the Nisei of the 100th Infantry beating the Nazis, they are also winning over hearts and minds left and right, and they're just getting warmed up.
Let's go. America, man. Get your hat on. We're all Americans. Care what you look like.
Left and right, and they're just getting warmed up.
So, big context here. This is where the Americans are going to meet the Axis in World War II, was from North Africa. They jump into the North African campaign. Mainland Europe is pretty much in lockdown in 1942. Again, it's not going to be... we still got 2 years away from D-Day to be able to break through against the Germans there. But there's the Germans, of course, that are in North Africa, but now we're going to get the Italians. which I guess I don't want to say is a good way to like warm up to eventually get to the Germans, but we all know how Italy's going to end up doing here. Not very well.
All right, by January of 1944,
Monte,
the
Cassino.
100th and the rest of the Allied forces have advanced through North Africa, and they have come up to the German Gustav Line. The Gustav Line is effectively the line in the sand that Germany has drawn, where they are not going to let the Allied forces advance past this point. It is heavily fortified, they have the high ground, they have all the advantages, and they are going to fight tooth and nail to not let Allied forces penetrate through this line into Europe. And one of the most vital areas of the Gustav Line is where the 100th Infantry is at. It's at Monte Cassino. Cassino is a small town, and then above it on a humongous hill overlooking the town is an old monastery that the Germans have turned into a massive fortress.
Oh, wow.
And not only that, they've went and chopped down all the trees on the hills and the ground in front of the monastery, knocked down all the buildings. So there's absolutely nothing to provide cover or concealment in case they assault. So you're pretty much running through an open field uphill into German machine gun fire if you try to take this position. And that's exactly what America is going to do anyways, because it's the only option. And because the 100th Infantry, which I'm now going to refer to by their nickname, the One Puka Puka, because it's easier for me to say, has developed a reputation for being both fearless and willing to take on any challenge, they are selected to lead the first assault on Monte Cassino. January 17th, 1944 at midnight, Alpha and Charlie Company of the One Puka Puka are going to take off, advance up this hill. They fight all the way up this hill and make it to the outer stone walls of this monastery, where they get pinned down and they continue to fight all night long. They're taking heavy casualties. They're running out of ammunition. It is straight up not a good time. They need more ammo, but now it's broad daylight out, so they're going to have to send in reinforcements. So they send in Bravo Company of the One Puka Puka, but if they go out in broad daylight up this hill with no cover, they're going to get absolutely mowed down. So they drop a bunch of smoke. Bravo Company starts advancing through the smoke, and then the wind shifts and blows all the smoke away, and they get just utterly destroyed. Of the 187 men of Bravo Company, only 14 of them end up making it to the wall. After taking that many casualties and running out of ammunition and having fought all night already, they are finally ordered to withdraw. A couple of weeks later, the Allied forces launch another major attack on Monte Cassino and the Gustav Line. This time, the One Puka Puka is ordered to take Castle Hill, a neighboring hill to the monastery that's of vital importance to be able to cut off support. The Nisei actually managed to fight their way up the hill and take the top of the hill, and they managed to hold it for 4 straight days, fighting their asses off. But then eventually, the flanks of the 34th Infantry end up collapsing, and they're about to get completely surrounded and stuck on top of this hill, at which point they are ordered to withdraw again. By this point, the 100th Infantry Battalion has lost 50% of their men, and they are ordered to the rear, where they can recuperate and pick up reinforcements to replenish their ranks. People start referring to them as the Purple Heart Battalion and the Little Men of Iron, a play on the 133rd Infantry Regiment's Iron Men nickname. After a brief recuperation, they are then sent to a different spot on the Gustav Line near Anzio, and this spot of the line is essentially World War I-esque warfare. Each team has their trench, and there's just no man's land in between. For 2 months straight, all they do is sit inside their trench.
Was there just no possibility for aerial cover here? They could bomb this fortress. I mean, obviously they know this stuff, but like, what was the issue there? Because what's one of the things that made trench warfare obsolete was the air war and how much it changed from World War I, to World War II. So why did they not get in control of the skies at this point? It's usually kind of the first thing you try to do here. And you saw this all over World War II.
And their foxholes. They fight all night and they sleep all day. The One Puka Puka starts referring to it as Dracula days. They sleep during the day, they draw blood at night. While the One Puka Puka is there is a third major attack on Monte Cassino by other Allied forces that also fails. At this point, the chain of command's getting restless. They're pissed. They need to break through the German Gustav Line, and eventually they come to the conclusion, fuck it, we're just gonna pick a point where we're gonna attack, and we're gonna hit that singular point along the line with absolutely everything we've got. The problem is, the Germans have massive tank units in the area too, and they need to know where those tank units are, because if they decide to attack at a singular point, and that's the point where there's a bunch of German tanks, it's not going to go that great for the Allied forces. So they
what I would ask is, tanks made me think about this too. Where is Patton in this? If you guys know, at this this stage of things in Italy, I mean, he was there, but like how involved?
need to figure this out.
He's the tank guy.
the point where there's a bunch of German tanks, it's not going to go that great for the Allied forces. So they need to figure this out. Otherwise, this is going to be a humongous gamble. At this point, a member of the 1 Puka Puka steps forward and goes to the chain of command because he's got an idea. And that man is Lieutenant Young Oak Kim. And Young Oak Kim is already a complete badass. He's already earned a Silver Star and a Purple Heart, and he's coming to the chain of command with this crazy idea. But what's most interesting about Young Oak Kim is he's one of the very few people in the 1 Puka Puka that's not Japanese. And that's because he's an officer, and typically the officers were white men, but in Young Oak Kim's case, he was Korean. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, the racial tensions between Japanese people and Koreans during World War II was pretty high, considering the Japanese had invaded Korea and were committing atrocities there.
Japan, that was actually one of the first places in the imperial phase, you know, long before World War II, actually, when they are going to annex that, a good couple decades, right? By this time, even before the war started, they had parts of Manchuria. They had annexed Korea already. So it was an early part of their empire. And that treatment of them, by the way, of the Koreans by the Japanese is something that's going to bring in their whole, you know, philosophy, anti-imperialist philosophy that becomes so strong, especially with those that are going to join the Communist Party after the war. This was the context for that. Okay, decades of brutal occupation by the Japanese.
Because of this, prior to deploying with the 1 Puka Puka, the chain of command pulled Young Oak Kim aside and they were like, hey, we understand that Japan is invading Korea. There's racial tensions between Japanese and Korean people. If you want, we can give you different orders and have you attached to a different unit. To which Young Oak Kim replied, and I quote, there are no Japanese nor Koreans here. We're Americans and we're fighting for the same cause. So Young Oak Kim is just a complete badass, and he goes to the chain of command and he's like, look, you need somebody to go behind enemy lines and figure out where these tank units are. Here's my plan. You guys keep attacking at night with these major formations. It's obvious. They know we're coming at night. Why don't you send me and one other guy behind enemy lines in broad daylight? I will sneak back there. I will capture a German soldier, drag him back. We can interrogate him and figure out where these tank units are, and then we'll know where to attack.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the reason they're doing this at night, again, because everything is so exposed, you're just a sitting duck there in the daytime. So, I mean, it made sense to do this, but all right, good luck, buddy. I'm guessing he does it. He successful.
You serious?
Okay, now right out of the gate, that's kind of a stupid idea, right? You're really going to go behind no man's land, capture an enemy soldier, drag him back without getting caught and killed. But the Allied forces are desperate, so they're like, you know what? It might work. And if it works, it's not that stupid. They give him the green light and he sets off to do it. May 16th, Lieutenant Kim and PFC Irving Akahoshi crawl through no man's land through an open wheat field in broad daylight, crawl all the way behind enemy lines where they find a German unit that had been up all night manning their machine guns. They then stalk them further behind enemy lines and watch them as they eat dinner, breakfast, whatever they're eating at this point in time. Watch them eat and then fall asleep. And then when two dudes go to, you know, be the guards, they stalk them, and then they end up sitting there and waiting till they fall asleep, and they wake them up by shoving their guns in their mouths so they can't scream. Kim and Akahoshi then take their two German prisoners, smuggle them back through no man's land, behind friendly lines, turn the prisoners over, they get interrogated, they gather the intel as to where the German tank units are, and define the battle plans for the entire Allied advance. 48 hours later, after setting off on his mission, the Allied forces launch their attack and Monte Cassino falls on May 18th. Lieutenant Young Oak Kim is then awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award in the American military.
Let's go.
And as he's getting that pinned on his chest, Commander Mark Clark looks down and sees his first lieutenant rank and then points over to a captain nearby and is like, you, Mayor. Captain approaches, he rips the captain rank off of this guy and pins Lieutenant Young Oak Kim as a captain as well.
I feel bad for the captain, though. Like, what did I do?
Cutting back to the rest of the 1 Puka Puka over at Anzio, they also coordinated the attack with the fourth battle of Monte Cassino, so that if Monte Cassino fell, they were also going to launch their offensive, hopefully driving the Germans back, so that they broke the Gustav line in two locations. That way, they could advance forward and in and either crush the Germans in the middle, or the Germans would be forced to retreat. And that's exactly what ended up happening. And not only that, the 1 Puka Puka was the lead element of the Anzio breakout. So now the Allied forces are chasing the Germans as they advance towards Rome, and the one Puka Puka is out front. And as they get near Rome, they're like 15 miles outside of Rome. They are going to be the first Americans to set foot in a major European capital as the Allied forces capture it. They are ordered to stand down as they peel off the side of the road and just kind of hang out in the ditch, and they don't know what's going on. And then
this is where internally, politically, it's getting very, very bad for Mussolini. Mussolini's people have turned against him at this time. They're actually going to drag him out here pretty soon, and they end up executing him. But it's completely collapsing on the inside.
American units start catching up, and then they keep marching into Rome. And now the one Puka Puka is not the first into Rome, and it dawns on them. They pulled us off to the side because they didn't want a bunch of Japanese dudes being the first Americans to capture a major European capital. That's what I thought. They never even got to set foot in Rome. They were ordered to go link up with the new Nisei unit, the 442nd Infantry Regiment, and they would be absorbed into that unit now instead. From here, the one Puka Puka still kind of retained its identity as the 100th Infantry Battalion, but they are just now one of 3 battalions inside of the 442nd Infantry Regiment. And their new unit slogan is one of the best and most famous slogans in military history. Go for broke, which is a Hawaiian slang term that basically means I'm going all in. I'm pushing all my chips into the table, because that's exactly how these guys felt. They're all in this shitty situation where their former homeland is attacking them, and their new home seemingly doesn't want them. So they're picking their side and they're going all in. From here, the 442nd is ordered to head north and take over a town called Suvareto, and this is going to be the first major military operation that they get to conduct by themselves. This is the ultimate point that they get to prove themselves, where they can say, we did that alone and nobody else helped. And they do it with surgical precision. They end up taking the 2nd and 3rd battalions of the 442nd Infantry Regiment, and they attack the front of the town, and then they send the 1st battalion, the one Puka Puka, around the backside to flank their retreat. Now, 2nd and 3rd battalion, this is the first time they've seen combat. These guys are green. They just got out of training. So the Germans actually end up launching a semi-successful counterattack, but the one Puka Puka, 1st battalion, sees it happening, and they instantly, without orders, adjust, go through, and they flank the Germans from the side, completely crushing them and taking over the entire town.
By the way, this is when Germany, Hitler was so pissed at Mussolini and Italy. It's like they were so mad that they even have to be down there in the first place, right? They're dealing with a Western Front. Well, pretty soon here. I mean, they've dealt with the West, but things are going pretty crazy out east. They're going to be fighting the Soviets, and it was something that, Hitler really was pissed off about Mussolini. It was like he was, and the Italians were the weak leg of this tripod that they're going to have with, Japan as well. And that they were just colossal failures, that, they had given them everything. Like Germany gave them everything and they still couldn't do it. And this was a devastating blow for Germany to have to be on another front and doing work that he thought another country should have been doing.
From here,
why are we even allies?
Infantry Division continues to advance deeper into Europe, and the 442nd alongside them is credited with over 1,100 confirmed kills and capturing 331 German prisoners of war. They then come up on another German defensive line where the Germans have dug themselves in, called Hill 40, which they end up nicknaming Little Cassino because of how hard the Germans resisted, and the town of Castanella. 442nd leads the assault on Little Cassino because, like it or not, they are now pretty much America's premier fighting force when the situation is running uphill into enemy gunfire and winning anyways. They battle the Germans for 3 days straight and end up taking Hill 140, aka Little Cassino, which is ironic because their entire motto is about gambling big and going for broke, and every single time they managed to win.
They always went broke. For broke. In the good way.
The 442nd goes on R&R for a little while. Then they get called back in. They are going to go into France, and they are getting detached from the 34th Infantry Division, and they are getting reattached to the 36th Infantry Division out of Texas. They travel 500 miles by foot and rail into France. They link up with the Texans, and they go back into battle. Now, combat from here, the terrain's completely different. They're in the Vosges Mountains. This combat is brutal. They're in heavily wooded forests, and every time they have to take a hill with Germans on top of it, the Germans retreat, run down the hill, run right up another hill, and then they have to fight up the high ground again. It's absolutely miserable.
Grueling.
And the first thing they need to do is they need to take over a town called Broyers, and in order to do that, they have to take over all the hills surrounding the town. There's 4 big ones, A, B, C, and D. The 442nd is in charge of taking over all the hills, while the rest of the 36th Infantry goes in and takes over the town.
It's kind of how Rome is. You heard of the hills of Rome? What is it, the 7 hills or something? It's kind of like a little valley there.
442nd goes to work, they do their thing, they run uphill into German machine gun fire, take the hills anyways on A, B, and C. But on D, the Germans are putting up a hell of a fight. This battle goes on for hours. It's just a seesaw battle of they drive up the hill, they get driven back down, they drive up, they get driven back down. It is yard by yard, brutal combat. They're taking heavy casualties. There's finally a lull in the battle. There's not a wave going up. And normally, all the combat they've been experienced to at this time, the Germans have been pretty respectful of the rules of war, right? When you're not launching an attack, you send out the medics go out there, they pick up the casualties, they pick up the dead, they bring them back, they get everybody taken care of. You extend the enemy the same courtesy. Right. That's usually how it's gone at this point. But now the Germans are getting desperate because D-Day has already happened. Shit is hitting the fan and they are no longer playing by the rules. The 442nd doesn't know that, so they send the medics out. The medics go, they lay out the litter, they grab a guy that's been shot, still alive, probably gonna survive. His name's Abe Ohama. They get him on the litter and they start carrying him back, and then the Germans open up on the medics and the wounded with machine gun fire. Abe Ohama, while he was on the litter, was struck again and immediately killed. Seeing this, the rest of the 442nd, unprompted, without orders, pissed off, gets on their feet, and charges the hill while screaming, takes the entire hill, killing 50 Germans and capturing another 7 as POWs. The 442nd has just conducted what is very reminiscent of a Japanese banzai charge, and it's practice that they're going to need for later.
Banzai charges are essentially suicide missions. We saw that their last stand type things, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, where they're just like going to go after. It's like, we're not probably going to win this battle, but we're going to go and take out as much as we can. We'll use a very scary tactic, which is literally run and scream out at the enemy and get as many as you can before you go down. But
here, the rest of the 36th Infantry goes in, they take over Boyeres, and the 442nd renames Hill D Ohama's Hill.
Does it say, okay, it's Chapter 4, Lost Battalion. I will never leave a fallen comrade. The Soldier's Creed. Yep.
At this point, the 442nd's been fighting nonstop for weeks on end, so they're finally sent back to the rear for R&R. And the second they get there, it's like 2 a.m. in the morning. They immediately get told there's an emergency. They got to turn back around and head back to the front line. The commander of the 36th Infantry, General Dahlquist, somehow got placed in charge of an entire infantry division and had never actually been in combat. In addition to that, men that served underneath him said he seemed to care more about being the first unit into Germany than he did about actually taking care of his guys and keeping them alive. These factors would culminate and come to a head on October 24th, 1944, when he would order the 1st Battalion of the 141st Infantry Regiment to overextend into German lines, and they would then be engulfed and completely surrounded by an entire German division. To put that into perspective,
a lot of these type of leaders don't last as long or don't get everything out of their troops, and they see their leaders just doing this for their own personal political gain. Because obviously, if he's able to put on his resume that he was the first to get into German territory, that makes you look so good, but you know, not at the expense of the soldier. You got to find that balance, you know, as a military leader.
If you don't know military unit sizes, that's about 300 men surrounded by about 6,000. So while the 442nd is making their way back to the front lines, General Dahlquist orders the 1st and 2nd Battalion of the 141st Infantry to go in and save their buddies. They go, they try fighting, they end up getting pushed back. And here's the kicker. The Germans just think that the Americans are trying to break through the line. They don't know that the Americans are freaking out because there's an entire battalion surrounded. They have no idea that 1st Battalion is up above them on a ridge. But from the American perspective, they think obviously the Germans know that. So they're like, oh shit, we can't punch through the line to go save them. We better start airdropping in ammunition, food, and water so they can stay up on that ridge and fight as long as possible. So they go and try to airdrop a bunch of supplies to them. The airdrop gets caught by the wind and goes off course. And then the Germans are like, wait a minute, why the fuck are the Americans airdropping supplies to us?
Right.
Oh shit,
Give away your position.
We have an entire battalion surrounded.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
So now they start attacking the Lost Battalion too. The 442nd makes it to the front line on October 28th.
Gave their position away, right?
Some of the Nisei feel they were sent in particular because they were deemed expendable, and if they all died, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. However, a lot of the other Nisei like to believe they were sent in because they were the best. So the 442nd goes in, and it is absolutely brutal. The Germans have minefields all over the fucking place. They have fortified machine gun positions. So the Lost Battalion's up here. The 442nd has to approach from here. There's the German line in between, and then off to the side is Hill 617 that also has a bunch of Germans on it, overlooking the approach to the German line.
So
they're just getting machine gun fire and mortars rained down on them from absolutely everywhere. For the first 2 days, the 442nd advances like a couple hundred yards. Every time they peek out from behind a tree or stick their head up out of a foxhole, anytime they leave cover, they're getting shot at. They can't move. They're completely pinned down. After 2 days of being essentially paralyzed on the battlefield, the 442nd, the Nisei decide they're going to live up to their motto, go for broke. They're just going to fucking send it. Here's the plan. They've got 3 battalions. They're going to send one of them up to Hill 617.
Battle scenes from Go for Broke. Oh, is this a film? Is it? Let me know.
Just gonna fucking send it. Here's the plan. They've got 3 battalions. They're gonna send one of them up to Hill 617. They're gonna take that hill, wipe the Germans off the top of it. Then they're gonna come back down the hill, rejoin the other 2 battalions, and then they're gonna launch a full-on assault and penetrate the German line and save the Texans. 3rd Battalion gets the order. They're gonna launch their attack on Hill 617 first, at which point the 3rd Battalion commander grabs his Colt 45 pistol and says, okay, boys, let's go. Nobody moves. Nobody wants to get out of their foxhole or poke their head out from behind their tree. If they get up, they're going to get shot. This is absolutely crazy. After that, a couple of moments go by, probably the longest couple of moments in human history. It's just dead quiet. Nobody wants to move. And eventually, 2nd Lieutenant Edward Davis, the last officer in his company, stands up and gets on his feet as all the other Nisei are looking at him like he's crazy. And he turns to his highest ranking NCO, Sergeant Kohashi, and asks him, doesn't order him, he asks him, will you go with me? Sergeant Kohashi leaps up onto his feet, screams a battle cry, and starts running up the hill. And all of the other Nisei do the exact same thing as they have a full frontal assault up this hill. Some of the men even sarcastically screamed bonsai, both making fun of the Japanese that do this and making fun of the situation as a whole, literally being a smartass in the face of death.
In translation, really what it just meant emotionally was F it. F it.
They take heavy casualties, but within an hour, they've cleared all the Germans off the top of Hill 617. They then split up that battalion and send some of the companies back down to rejoin the other 2 battalions as they begin their assault towards the German line. And
the troops, the German troops that are in Italy at this time, around this region, where do they rank as far as, I don't know, experience or skill or whatever, as compared to where the Germans have troops now? I mean, you said this is after D-Day, so you've got Western Front, but then of course you've had the meat of the war, meat grinder over in the East, on the Eastern Front with the Soviets. But then you have these guys like in Italy. Are they not the cream of the crop Germans? Are they younger ones? Are they actually experienced? If any of you guys know, just in general, what type of troops and level of troops did Germans put in Italy? Let me know.
And those companies that come down from the hill bring the same energy with them, and they launch another bonsai charge straight at the German line. Worth noting, one of the men that was in this charge was...
For an American, I don't know. I mean, you wouldn't yell it then. Back in those days, but like, YOLO, I don't know. It would be like the white American thing to say for something like bonsai. YOLO!
Daniel Inouye. Remember the kid charge straight at the German line. Worth noting, one of the men that was in this charge was Daniel Inouye. Remember the kid we talked about earlier that dropped out of med school to go be part of the 442nd? He is in this charge going in to rescue the Lost Battalion. And as he's charging towards the German line, he gets shot in the chest. But he carries $2 silver in his front breast pocket for good luck, and they literally deflect the bullet and save his life. The 442nd.
See, he's got karma. What he did, sacrificing his whole career, high-level career on the line, to go on the front lines. Karma, man. The war gods, God Ares or whatever is out there watching these guys. He was all in. Oh my gosh.
For good luck. And they literally deflect the bullet and save his life. The 442nd then proceeds to fight and break through the German line, and what happens next is probably one of the coolest moments in human history. Cutting back to the Lost Battalion, they've been surrounded and fighting for their lives for the past 5 days. They're starving, they're dehydrated, they're low on ammunition, and there's this 19-year-old Texan kid in his defensive perimeter with his gun pointed outward, just waiting for the Germans to come and get him. There's fog, there's smoke, he can't see shit, and off in the distance he sees a silhouette approaching, and it's getting closer and it's getting closer, but the silhouette's not shooting at him, so he doesn't shoot at them. And as it gets closer, he can start to see the person through the smoke, and it's a Japanese guy in an American uniform, Private First Class Matt Sakamoto. And as he gets closer, he stops, and Matt Sakamoto and this young Texan kid are looking at each other, and this Texas kid's lip starts quivering and he starts tearing up. He's just had his life saved by this Nisei soldier. And then Matt Sakamoto, in the coolest thing ever,
they weren't abandoned,
just reaches in his pocket and pulls out a package of Lucky Strike cigarettes, one for himself, and goes, "You want to smoke?" And a couple seconds after that, the rest of the Nisei come walking through the smoke, and they've rescued the Lost Battalion. 64 men of the
and rock music is just like blaring from behind them. America!
Lost Battalion were killed in combat. 211 of them were saved by the 442nd. To save those men, the 442nd sustained 800
I mean, they shouldn't have been there in the first place,
120
right?
dead and 680 wounded. And it is at this point that a rational person that's maybe never served in the military would ask, is that even worth it? Should they have went in there to rescue them if it costs that much? And the answer is unequivocally yes. And it's not because the Nisei were expendable or that they were worth less than the Texans. It's because nobody's expendable. When you join the United States Army, when you become a soldier, they make you say the Soldier's Creed over and over and over again ad nauseum. And in the Soldier's Creed, it says, "I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. I will never leave a fallen comrade." And those aren't just words that they make you say because they sound good. No, it's a promise to the person to the left and the right of you that no matter how bad shit gets, we're gonna come to get you because you're one of us. You're not just some number on a spreadsheet that we can plug into a mathematical calculation and determine if you're worth saving or not. No.
Well, that's for the higher ups to do, and they do that, but not on the boots on the ground, right?
Spreadsheet that we can plug into a mathematical calculation and determine if you're worth saving or not. No, you're an American soldier and we're coming to fucking get you.
You're goddamn right.
And there's never been a better embodiment of this principle than the 442nd rescuing the Lost Battalion. Because not only did they live up to the ideal of you're one of us, we're coming to get you no matter what, they also in doing so proved that they are one of them. The Nisei, the outsiders, the Japanese that nobody can trust, proved irrefutably that they're not Japanese, they're not outsiders, they're just Americans. They're one of us. Okay, now, finally, after getting pulled off of R&R almost immediately to go save the day and rescue the Lost Battalion, they are then finally sent to southern France where they can actually have some R&R. And from November till March, they're on a security detail that's relatively low impact. They get to rest, recuperate, they get their ranks replenished, and this is referred to as the Champagne Campaign. Then in April of 1945, the Allied forces finally make it to the German Gothic Line, their last ditch effort of defenses inside of Italy. It is heavily fortified, and like everything else the Germans made, it's believed to be impenetrable.
That's actually hilarious.
Last stand for the Germans here. I mean, it was pretty amazing when they're getting down to April of 45. If you know about April, April's such a huge month. FDR dies from his complications from his from polio. Mussolini's going to be executed. And of course, at the end of the month, Hitler's going to assassinate himself. But it's amazing that down to this point, Italy's fallen. They're marching miles away from Berlin. That the German command was still ordering defense. They still thought, I don't know, fate is on their side, that they can still do this. They're bunkering down in Berlin and just not surrendering. I mean, they had to get blocks away, literally, for Hitler to finally accept defeat.
So the Allied forces called up the A-Team. They bring in the 442nd. Nothing has fucking stopped these guys yet. This probably isn't going to stop them either. And because they're the best guys, they're going to get the toughest mission. They are assigned to attack one of the mountain strong points of the entire Gothic Line. Literally the most impenetrable part. That's where the 442nd is going to attack. Now, the reason the chain of command did this is they wanted to use the 442nd as a diversionary attack, right? They're going to have the 442nd attack this super strong point. That way, the Germans are going to send all of their reinforcement troops to this strong point to hold that point, right? And then once all the reserve troops are there fighting the 442nd, because these guys aren't going to give up, and hell, they might win anyways, they're going to be able to attack a weaker part in the Gothic Line and punch through. However, nobody told the 442nd that, so the 442nd treats it not as a diversionary attack, but as a main attack, and they punch through the strongest point with reinforcements anyways in a single day.
Your plan. It worked.
And during that attack on April 1st, 1945, the main character that's been there all along would finally emerge. Daniel Inouye, the 18-year-old kid that dropped out of medical school and put his dreams of becoming a surgeon on hold to go off and fight for his country. Daniel Inouye, the guy that helped save the Lost Battalion and had his life saved by $2 silver when he was shot in the chest, had ended up getting promoted in the field to a lieutenant and was now leading an entire platoon. During the attack on the Gothic Line, Daniel Inouye's platoon gets pinned down by 3 German machine gun nests with MG-42s, the most terrifying machine gun of World War II. With his entire company pinned down, Daniel decides that he's going to live up to the unit motto of go for broke, and he's going to do some gangster shit. Advancing by himself, he gets shot in the stomach, fights through it, gets to the German machine gun nest, hits it with a grenade, blows it up, immediately shifts to go to the next German machine gun nest, makes it all the way there, throws another grenade in that one, takes out the Germans there as well. He then crawls up to the 3rd German machine gun nest, gets within 10 yards, grabs his grenade, pulls the pin, he's just holding down the spoon, winds back to throw it, and the German inside the nest shoots him with an anti-personnel grenade that hits him directly in the elbow. He was so close that the grenade didn't have time to arm itself, and it is just the blunt force trauma of a massive grenade flying at him that severs the majority of his arm. His men immediately leap up to help him, but he screams at them to stay under cover because he's worried that that arm that he's not in control of anymore is going to relax and let go of the spoon on that grenade and kill him and even more of his men.
That's what I was thinking.
So he orders them to stay back. In his own words, and I quote, "I looked at my right hand and it was gone. The grenade was still there, clenched in a fist that suddenly wasn't a part of me anymore. I pried it out with my left hand and threw it."
Okay, so that's how it works. It's just going to remain in the position that it was when it was severed. Is that how this like muscle retraction works? If it's gone, it was still the pin or the what do you call it? The spoon was still in his hand. Dude, that's crazy.
That grenade hits its target, and Daniel Inouye has just taken out a 3rd German machine gun nest.
Wait, let me go back.
It wasn't a part of me anymore. I pried it out with my left hand and threw it.
Okay, so I thought I was thinking, because he said he held on to it for a minute before he pulled the pin and then held it on for a minute. I figured that there wouldn't be time to actually like pick it up and throw it. Maybe you could kick it or something. Or at the very least, I guess jump on it. But he was actually able to get it out with his left hand. He's got no arm on his right hand, pries it up with his left hand and throws it with his weak hand, I guess, and drops a dot like Tom Brady here.
That grenade hits its target, and Daniel Inouye has just taken out a 3rd German machine gun nest, both left-handed and single-handedly, literally. He then gets to his feet and continues advancing on the German position, killing at least one more German with his Thompson submachine gun before getting shot in the leg and collapsing to the ground unconscious. He then wakes back up, flat on his back, looking up at his men who are looking down at him, and he hits them with the hardest line in military history, and I quote, "Nobody called off the war," literally telling his dudes, quit worrying about me and assault the fucking objective.
Boys, we're gonna win this fight.
And as if that wasn't gangster enough, Daniel Inouye is then rushed to the rear where he receives emergency medical treatment and has to get his arm amputated in the field completely sober. He had already received too much morphine in the field, they couldn't give him any more without killing him, and they don't have anesthesia on the front lines in World War II, so they just had to cut it off while he was awake. While that's going on, Inouye's men and the rest of the 442nd go on a German ass-kicking extravaganza. Over the course of the next week, they liberate like 5 towns, a concentration camp, they secure key roads, they cut off German supply lines, they're forcing Germans to surrender left and right. The 442nd is advancing so fast that American supply lines can't even keep up, and they're forced to operate on whatever they confiscate from the Germans that they kill or surrender to them. Then on May 2nd, 1945, the German forces inside of Italy surrender. 5 days after that, May 7th, 1945, all of Germany surrenders, and World War II for the 442nd is over.
Okay, I was wondering now, though, if these guys are going to be relocated to the Pacific War, because, you know, some were, a lot were actually. Some of them got a break for a little bit, but some got shipped out. So I'm wondering if they, at this point, are like, okay, we trust you to actually fight the Japanese, but we'll see here. Looks like we're wrapping up. We got about less than 5 minutes left. So Chapter 6, Americans. Okay.
When all was said and done, approximately 18,000 men fought in the 442nd Infantry Regiment. And those 18,000 men were awarded more than 18,000 medals, making them the most decorated unit in U.S. military history for their size and tenure. A few of those medals include 8 Presidential Unit Citations, which is like the Medal of Honor for a military unit, and they earned 5 of them in a single month. 21 Medals of Honor, 29 Distinguished Service Crosses, somewhere between 360 and 600 Silver Stars, 4,000 Bronze Stars, and 9,486 Purple Hearts. And that is the story of the Nisei, the Americans that made up the 442nd Infantry Regiment that had every excuse in the world to hate America and chose to love and fight for it anyways. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out.
You fought not only the enemy, but you fought prejudice.
Yes.
And you've won. Keep up that fight, and we'll continue to win. We'll make this great republic stand for just what its Constitution says it stands for. The welfare of all the people, all the time.
Truman's the one that desegregated. I think in 1948, the military became desegregated. But we know that fight for equal rights is going to continue on. We're going to have a civil rights movement happening here in World War II. And just like with the Japanese experience there, of course, you had the other type of racial minorities that went and fought in World War II. You had African Americans, Latino Americans, Asian Americans, you name it, coming back to a society that was still segregated. Economic opportunities were still much more difficult and disproportionate. And this was, supposed to be the leverage that change needed to happen. And it's going to take a while for really a lot of these pushes to happen, but you can see what we're working with here. All right. Other final thoughts. All right. One of the best stories that the Fat Electrician has shared with us. I learned so much about these guys. I'm super excited to relay this and opportunities that I can with my students, tying it in just with the kind of the nature of the United States at that time, about how we dealt with not just the Japanese Americans themselves, because, you're going to talk about that, but our racial makeup as well. And then how these, historically marginalized groups showed up so well in World War II. Similar thing happened in World War I as well, and what you see if you look in history, especially in American histories, after every major war we've had, there's a civil rights movement that follows it. It may be for women. It may be for, again, minorities of other type of racial differences or whatever, but you usually find something like that. And that's going to be the big one that happens here. So it'll be good to be able to use this as a story, I think, to weave that together and look at the effects of the war into how it's going to change society and give a good look at what American society was like at that time and then how it's going to be forced really to change afterwards. So this will be a great story, I think, to do that. So I'm looking forward to that. All right. Great one. Loved it. One of my favorites, absolutely, so far. Hey, remember the Dunkirk 1940 event going on in World of Warships right now. Go down in the description, get started. And like I said before, let's bring those guys home. All right, we'll see you guys next time.